Hi, Erin. Welcome to Casual Space.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's so good for you to finally be here with us, joining us. Our paths continue to cross, and I'm so happy for you back at Johnson Space Center because um, it's such a great place to work. But you have been working in this field for quite some time. How did you get started as a science writer?
Yeah, so I always say I'm the weird engineer who liked to write. So I actually have a mechanical engineering background.
Cool.
But when I graduated, I found my passion was more in using that technical background to help everyone understand all of this complex science because it's not easy to explain and it's hard to be an expert in both science, engineering, and communications.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of fun being able to work with all of these amazing scientists and engineers to help tell those stories. So I became a journalist after I graduated. I worked for a little bit at The Economist over in London and then at MIT Technology Review. So that's where I kind of
Wow.
like came up in the world of writing and all things, science. So and then afterwards, I saw this job posting on Twitter that happened to be at a NASA contractor down at Johnson Space
On
Center. Yeah,
Twitter. That's so
I
great.
know, right? Awesome place for space networking.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that brought me down to JSC. I've been here for over 3 years now.
Oh my gosh. And very impressive work, might I say. Did you
Thank
always want
you.
to work in the space industry, or did you want to just naturally go into a science-based writing that just happened to be NASA?
I always say when you look back at someone's career, sometimes it's easy to be like, oh, of course they did this. And I think sometimes if you look back at, my passions and things, it seemed obvious that I was going to do this, but I didn't feel that way coming through that path. I grew up in a space loving family. My grandpa worked on the Saturn Fives and
Really?
shuttles down in Florida. So I'm from Florida originally because that was brought my family down there. So
Oh,
grew
wow.
up yeah, it was a very cool thing to be able to walk out in your front yard and see a rocket launch. I took it for granted as a kid.
Sure.
Um, so I've always enjoyed space. I didn't go into mechanical engineering necessarily intending to go into space. I just more love making things. And honestly, even as a writer, I love making things. You're just making things with
Of
words instead
course.
of making things with
Yes.
gears and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, I've always had an interest in space growing up with that type of environment. But yeah, I kind of took a little bit of roundabout path. I actually, when I interned at, John Deere and Caterpillar and much more like manufacturing heavy things, because again, the making things love. So that
Yes.
was more the way I went with engineering until I kind of found the way to come back into space more as a writer rather than as someone who's, designing rocket parts.
That is so cool. What did your grandfather do on the Saturn V?
So he worked on the solid rocket boosters on the sides. So he
Wow.
was a test engineer. He also worked for a contractor too, similar to what I do now, and then worked on shuttle stuff for a little bit, but was more like I said on the test side of things.
That is so cool. What a great family history tied to the space program. Was he
Yeah.
able, was he, is he still alive?
No, he actually passed away right before the first shuttle launched. So it's one of the things my whole family went to the first shuttle launch kind of in his honor, and I still have some of his jackets and things like that. So it's fun to be able to carry on that legacy, even though he's not able to be here to
Ah,
see that. The rest
was
of my family is all teachers, so I guess it makes
oh
sense. Again,
wow.
I am who I am, combining those two things.
I see that now. I understand. Was your grandfather, were you old enough for him to pass on some anecdotal stories or explanations of his work and his job?
More so, I've seen a lot of artifacts of that time. My family's has some hoarders in it, some loving hoarders. So I've like seen a lot of the like pictures that he took when he was working on this because he was a big photographer,
Oh,
and I've
wow.
seen like his resumes and things from the time. I wasn't ever able to like actually talk with him directly, but it's still cool to be able to kind of have those
So cool.
pieces of history passed down in that way and see how he had like a 8-page resume because resumes were done a little bit differently
I
it's fun to be
bet.
able to read those different things on there. He also worked for like Hoover Vacuums as an engineer and things like that. So that's not as cool to rocket stuff, but as an engineer, also fun to be able to
I
see.
love hearing that this was in your family history. So great. And teachers,
Yeah.
that's perfect sense because you really do when you write. And anyone who's read your writing, it's so inviting. It's very easy to read. You don't
Thank
feel
you.
overwhelmed by technical references. It's just such a joy. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges as science writers is to be able to communicate something highly technical and involved and complex to a vast audience. And you certainly do that through your work. You've recently done that in one of your books that has just become available. Can you walk us through your International Space Station book?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in my full-time job now at Johnson Space Center, I'm a science communication specialist, and I have, day to day of working on talking about all the science that's worked on the space station. But we do a lot of looking back because we've had more than 20 years on the space station now. So that's a lot of science. And one of the projects that I helped lead was the International Space Station Benefits for Humanity publication, which is basically looking back at all of this amazing work that we've done and looking at how it's benefited us back here on Earth in different ways, whether it's for like, breakthroughs in science or, a direct application for a product that you might use in your home, or even helping us explore further into the solar system. So it was a lot of fun to be able to write. I wrote probably about a third of it. I edited the full thing, helped with project coordination. But the coolest thing was just diving into this whole history and all of these thousands of experiments and seeing what a lot of the results have been. Because we're often focused on what's launching now and the rockets, but we have
Sure.
such a rich history of all of these benefits that, I think is really great to be able to share and show people that there is so much that has come out of this huge investment in both in time and effort and exploration.
Oh, over 20 years worth. So, what are some
Yeah.
of your favorites? I'm totally going to put you on the spot.
Sure. Yeah. Well, one of the ones that I thought was really interesting, it's not like fully come out yet, but so NICER is a neutron star related telescope that's mounted on the outside of the space station, uses looks for X-rays and things in the universe. And when they were developing it, they had to create this new type of X-ray technology that when a scientist at Massachusetts General Hospital saw it, they said, that's exactly what I'm looking for to help improve CT scanners and create CT scanners that don't have large rotating moving parts, which would make them more accessible and easier to transport, and
Okay.
potentially have lower radiation doses when people are getting CT scans, which many of us have gotten CT scans out
Sure.
there, and it's something that's continually used. And it's so cool to see this is a telescope that's looking and exploring the universe, has this direct application that they are now working on and developing it from like a lab prototype and moving it forward. Like, how cool is that?
That is really cool.
Um,
From Earth to
yeah,
space and back again. So great.
exactly. Yeah. And then I also have to say, people always are like, what's the one that I use on a day to day basis? One of the ones that's always a little bit hard to explain conceptually in science is colloids. So my best example of colloids is it's particles suspended in a liquid. So it could be anything like a shampoo, a toothpaste, mud, or milk, or more like natural ones.
Okay.
We study these in space because without the forces of gravity on them, those particles don't settle down to the bottom as much. So we can look at the other forces in colloids, and that's important because it can help improve shelf life for things like our shampoos and toothpaste and stuff like that. So Procter and Gamble has actually done a lot of research on the International Space Station into colloids, and they even applied some in their new Febreze Unstoppables product. So if you go out and buy some of those, that used space station research to help make
Really?
that formula. So super cool to see how these companies are able
Mm.
to like patent different things and apply it in ways that all of us are just using in our house.
Yes, space station scented freshness,
Yes,
which
perfect.
I understood from one of the astronauts that it smells like burnt toast.
I've heard different reviews from different astronauts, but it generally burnt is a common one that I've of different types of burnt things. Yeah.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of experiments doing a lot of heat transfer. Could very well smell like that, but I'm going to buy the Unstoppables now. There's so many more that I know are commercial references that we can do and we use in our everyday life. Is there other things that maybe I can put you on the spot for that enhanced maybe one particular person or in academia? I know just not so long ago, we had a guest on the show who talked about the DNA sequencing on board station. Um,
Yes.
I mean, people don't imagine that it's been 20 years. It seems like a blink of an eye. Like we just started assembling it and getting it up there. I certainly remember that. But, people often are asking, well, what are some of the benefits and why are we still doing it? And
Mhm.
what's it still doing up there? And the list is vast and long. I mean, it covers an entire book, but some things
Yeah,
will continue to invest in and see the results long after station is no longer implementing some of the
totally.
science. Can you walk us through a couple more?
Yeah, well, first of all, a big DNA sequencing fan too. That team that works on that is so cool,
Oh
and the work
yeah.
that they've done to continually advance that. 2016, Kate Rubin sequenced DNA for the first time on station, but so much has happened since. They continue to advance that technology. So big fan of that as well.
Yeah.
Some of the other things you mentioned, flame and combustion related stuff. There's been a lot of breakthroughs related to that in orbit. If you haven't ever seen a flame burning in space, highly recommend looking it up. It actually burns as a sphere and it's very beautiful. You can even get this kind of like dandelion effect of this soot burning off of it. But there's been a lot of combustion research that's been done because, again, gravity is a huge factor when you look at flames on Earth. It creates kind of that candle shape to a flame with that like pointed top and bottom.
Mhm.
But when you take gravity out of the equation, you can really study many of the other aspects of combustion in a completely unique way, which helps us just understand the aspects of combustion better, which can then help us create more efficient engines and things like that back here on Earth, and keep people safe in space. Because last thing you
Yeah.
want is a fire in space, and if there is, you want to know how to keep people safe.
Sure.
So those are some really important things that we've been studying.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many areas of science. We also have a lot of fluid physics studies that are being done. There's one that's going to launch on an upcoming commercial resupply mission that is looking actually at catastrophic post-wildfire mud flows, which I know is a
Whoa.
mouthful, but after wildfires, it affects the ground around where the fire happened. Plants are gone, roots have been affected, soil is affected, and often a common problem can be that mud flows, landslides occur afterwards. And so they're actually doing some fluid physics studies, again, in orbit. When you take gravity out of the equation, you can see those other forces and the way that these particles interacting to kind of have a better understanding of these mud flows that aren't really well understood, and hopefully then be able to create preventive measures or better understand them.
Wow.
So many things that you just wouldn't expect there to be an application or thing
Right?
studying, but
Yes.
it's very
Well,
cool.
being a former NASA insider writer myself, I
Yes.
love when these hidden gems and these wonderful examples are brought to the surface. And really, if you think about it, there's something for everyone. I mean, you can be in any industry or any field of work, and there's something that NASA has either experimented on or touched or involved or improved,
Yeah.
and it's vast. And that was the whole idea behind the agency years ago. But it really is also, when we talk about space station, we talk about this orbiting laboratory that also happens to be where you live in space as well. But
Yeah.
let's not forget the international partner aspect too, that
Hmm.
brings in this peacetime invitation for all the countries and partners, and now the commercial partners. So we've really been able to see this space station go through the evolution of assembly into the science and use and living lab into this international and commercial partnership that continues today. But to see that evolution of those three stages has been such a joy. You're seeing it as well.
Yeah.
And now that we're in that last phase, I think now more than ever, we're seeing the value of space station. And I'm even going to stretch it, and I didn't want to get into politics, but I think a lot of like the Artemis Accords and a lot of things that how we're going to maneuver and work and future forward into space will be
Hmm.
taken from case studies on how we've managed, I say we, NASA and international partners, this project for the last 20 years peacefully, successfully. It's amazing how much we've done in, I mean, it's really just a blurb of time, really little, but so much has been accomplished without, and let's not sugarcoat. Things are hard. Space is hard.
Sure.
Partner, they say space is hard, but politics in space is even harder. But I don't think the International Space Station has had too many real serious, like, nothing has threatened it so far. I know we've had our blips and our moments, as does any project, but science is this universal that seems to be like how we're being able to do science so much better off planet than we can sometimes on planet.
Yeah, one of the it's talking about like those decades as you were talking, the different phases of station. We've been talking about the first decade was really the decade of construction. The
Yeah.
second decade was this decade of utilization, which is just like using the space station. And this third decade, we're talking about in the context of the decade of results, which is not to say that we haven't had results in the past, but we just have so much now, and we're building on these past results that we've had from these, past 20 years before that. It's cool to see this third decade come about. I mean, every week there's many papers that come out that are published from these, research projects that have happened over all this time, which if you work in the area of science, that's a lot to have like even multiple papers come out from this thing that you've been working on.
Sure.
And it's so cool to see, again, publications from all over the world, tons of different experiments from all different types, which, we took as many as we could and tell those stories in this book. But even so, they're still coming out every week, new discoveries. And it's so cool to see. And now how a lot of that's, as you mentioned with exploration, Artemis being applied to this next stage, because the space station is also a testing grounds for exploration, and being able to see some of these technologies to be directly applied on Artemis, things that are being tested on station, also being tested on Artemis 1, like that overlap is cool to be able to see that cooperation between these two
Yes.
massive projects.
Yeah. Even when I'm asked to speak, sometimes they're like, Beth, I always tell people one of my hidden talents is to be able to take pretty much anything that you throw at me and tie it back to a space reference or a space.
Sure.
It's just part of our job, right? It's what we love to
Yeah,
do, and
it's
it's
all in
fun.
our brain.
It
Yeah.
it truly is. It's like, it's just, if they could pay me, or if there's some kind of like Jeopardy something where I could be on a show and they're like, okay, we're going to give you the most obscure thing and you're going to tie it back to space, I'd be like, I can do it. So, and
Yes,
you certainly can
absolutely.
too, Erin. I know you can. One of the things recently was, I can't even say this without giggling. A bunch of folks who are at a professional organization asked, who happen to be exterminators. And I'm like, you know how many bugs have been flown to space? And they're like, no. And I'm like, yes, so many,
Yeah,
all kinds too, very
totally.
large variety of bugs. And
Yeah.
people just don't realize, like, there's actual books written by incredibly fun folks that just highlight the bugs that have gone to space and what's happened to them and the
Yeah.
results. And
Bugs are an
space,
important part of research. So
it's
yeah,
fun,
absolutely.
right? It actually is, because, well, how do their chemistry change? Does their migration
Hmm.
patterns change? Do they understand gravity in the same way we do? It's just, I mean, it's fun. Space can be just as much fun as anything else too. You
Yeah.
have had a lot of fun. I know that there's been some things you just light up with joy when you reference and discuss, but I want to take a moment and have some fun to
Hmm.
say congratulations. A lot of people really don't understand the significance of what you recently received, which is one of NASA's highest honors, the Silver Snoopy Award.
Yeah, I couldn't believe I got a surprise in a meeting when I was told I was being given that. Yes.
Congratulations. Okay, so
Thank
for
you.
folks who don't know, less than 1% of the NASA workforce is presented with this very small and very significant pin that
Yes.
you receive for doing an incredible job. And it's usually given to you by an astronaut. And it's usually, most of the time, I think all the time, it's been flown to
Yes.
space on board. And Erin, I can absolutely understand why you received it. Walk us through how and who gave it to you and what they said.
Sure.
Such
Yeah.
a moment.
Mark Polanski is the person who runs our NASA contract, and he is also a former NASA astronaut. And so I went into a meeting where I was a little suspicious, because like people were like, "Are you definitely going to be here? You're definitely going to be in this meeting, right?" And I was like, "Yep, I'm going to be in that meeting. Something seems up here." Um,
Like, why wouldn't you be? Right.
yeah. So, and then at the start of the meeting, Mark came in with his astronaut jacket on and presented me and one other person on our contract. It was very cool to be able to have two of us. They were in the same meeting, getting told we're getting this, and
Oh,
announced and talked about some of our work. It was mainly for a lot of my work that I've done for social media for the agency, and just in general science storytelling, and get told told everyone at this important meeting about it. And then so we get the pin a little bit later because with COVID they have like, you know, they're arranging the different ceremonies. So in the meantime, he gave us a little printout of the pin with a piece of tape on it, and officially in that meeting gave us the tape silver Snoopy, and I have
Oh,
that up at my desk as the holding place until I get the real one
oh,
in a couple of months after Artemis gets off the ground. So it was a
wow.
very cool moment.
Well, it is so, so deserved. I mean, I've enjoyed all your
Thank
work. I
you.
love keeping up with your work, and I really enjoy the art of your work. A lot of people, I don't know about
Thanks.
you, Erin, I've been dying to ask. Sometimes, do you ever
Uh-huh.
dream in words? Like, do you ever arrange words in your moments and you're like, oh, it would be stronger if we arrange the words this way or do an intro that way? Because it's truly something I think only wordsmiths and writers do.
You know, it's very funny. I have my husband always makes fun of me. I have like the weirdest dreams. I have very like artist creative dreams. I definitely have a lot of dreams where I've been in space or like different
Oh.
astronauts, you know, floating around, things that I've been working with. So that is definitely one I've had. I don't know if I've had rearranging words, honestly, more than like sometimes I'm filming like a social media video in a dream sort of thing. But I know what you're saying, like just of the storytelling aspect that seeps into other parts of your life
It
and
does.
figuring out the most effective way to say something.
Yeah. And you're so inventive. I remember one of your very first posts, whether it was personal or with the agency at the time, but you had created the same dress as what was the parachutes for one of the Mars rovers with the
Yes.
very special hidden message within the dress, within the blips. How am I explaining this? You'll do such a better job.
No, it's all good. Yeah, one of my passions is also the intersection between science and fashion, just because I think that there's so much creativity in science and space, and it's really fun to be able to show that also as a conversation starter in what I'm wearing. When sometimes I'll get randomly inspired and I make a lot of skirts. I have a closet that looks like Miss Frizzle's from the Magic School Bus. Um,
Love it.
yeah, so when I saw the parachute from the Perseverance rover when it was landing on Mars, it looked very unique. And at first, everyone was like, "Why is there like kind of this odd pattern of whites and reds around it?" And the internet, as the internet does, immediately deciphered it and found out that it was code that said "Dare Mighty Things," which is the Jet Propulsion Laboratory slogan. Um, and so I actually worked with my husband, who has better graphic design skills than I can do the 3D design. He does the better 2D graphic design, and made the layout. I laid it out on a skirt and got it printed, which originally was just for myself because I thought this was a fun personal project. But then I posted it online. It kind of blew up, and
Oh
everyone wanted
yeah.
one.
Oh
So
yeah.
so yeah, I partnered with some a woman-owned small business. I'm a huge fan of Sartorialist, and I gave them the design to be able to sell and get out there. And now I think hundreds of people now have this skirt, and it's very fun to be able to see pictures pop up of people wearing this everywhere from, you know, like GPL mission control to flying a
Yeah.
plane. So it's
It's
been very
so
fun.
great. I love that design. It's colorful, it's bright, but it's also the fact that it has a hidden message is just a like small way we can communicate amongst ourselves, like just kind of having that feeling, that secret feeling like I know what that
Yeah,
means. That's super cool.
totally.
What are
Do you
some
have a
of your
favorite
other
piece of
skirts?
I have to ask, do you have a favorite piece of space fashion? Because I feel like you probably have
Oh,
something in your closet.
yeah,
So
I
or
do. I mean,
jewelry.
like, okay, so I've all my years, like, the NASA culture is to collect the pin or the badge,
Yes.
or I
Uh-huh.
should say the patch, because every patch is so meaningful and detailed and involved, and it's so personal. I mean, it really does
Yeah.
come from the artist and the astronaut themselves. And I would be amiss if I didn't shout out to Tim Gagnon, who is one of the most incredible artists, creators that makes many of the patches. But he works
Yeah.
with the vision and the ideas of the astronauts. But in all my years, I mean, I have like 4 flight suits from some analogs and from Space Camp, and
Nice.
those are fun. Those are always fun. Don't get me wrong. But in all my years, I've always wanted an aviator bomber jacket, and I didn't get it
Ooh.
until just last year. And now I'm too
Oh,
afraid to like, I don't want to puncture it. I don't want to put a pin on it. It's just
gotta
nice to
protect
have
it.
a slippery, silky jacket. And I throw it on now, and weather is like permitting pretty soon. And I feel equally like pulled in 2 places because I'm like, I haven't earned this jacket, but I kind of have, but I'll put some patches on it and then I'll make it. But I've always wanted that. So yeah, a bomber jacket, you can't go wrong. And everyone
Cool.
looks good in one of those. But I would
I love
love to
that.
wear one of the skirts. Do you have others like for Artemis or for other space?
Yeah. So my other ones that I have, so my personal favorite that I've made also, in addition to that one, was a space station cupola skirt, because it's
Oh,
so the window from the space station back to Earth, which,
yes.
astronauts have taken millions and millions of photos from that viewpoint. I found one that was very cool and high definition, and put it on a circle skirt. So you are kind of like in the middle of the window, and then the panels are on the skirt around you. So one of
Love
my
it.
favorites, just because I have spent the past more than 3 years with the space station, so it has a soft spot in my heart.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a number of other dresses and things from other people that I didn't design, other people that are in this and make amazing fashion designs as well. And I have a great selection of jackets, but I do live in Houston, Texas, so I don't get to
Yeah.
wear them as much as I would like.
Right,
So
right. You don't really need that. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. One of the girls, again, who helped on the team with the sequencing of the DNA,
Hmm.
Dr. Sarah, she
Hmm.
was a guest on the show and she actually got married at Space Center Houston. And I think she had all kinds of like NASA swag. I need to ask
Cool.
her if her wedding dress had any NASA stuff in it. I bet it did because she's just super fan as well. And the NASA logo is one of the most recognized logos in the world, whether it's the worm
Hmm.
or the meatball. And yeah, I think I asked Nicole Stott once which one, and I really put her on the spot. I'm like, meatball or worm? And she's like, I mean, and being an artist herself, she's like, I don't know technically if I can answer that appropriately.
It's a
But
hard call. They're both great. So
yeah, but when you're part of this mission and this greater, I mean, the NASA culture is so incredibly inviting and inclusive. Where it's like I mean, just the logo right now for Artemis is "We are going." We,
right.
we, like all of Earth, we're going back to the moon. Yes, the agency is leading, but we are going back. So when you feel that power and you want to represent it in the work you do and the things you wear and the things that you enjoy in life. So I
Yes.
really love when there's, I don't know what you call us, investors or fans, where we get to, we get to walk the walk and talk the talk and write the words. So
Yeah,
um
totally. And
what are
no,
some of your yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, the we are going thing. I feel like also I'm excited to see some of the space station like outreach legacy carry on in that context too, because we've done, so many like downlinks of astronauts with students and ham radio contacts over the
Yeah.
years and all these different programs. And I feel like we've learned so many lessons on how to like take people along for a mission too, that I'm really excited to see if the new unique things we do for Artemis, and like kind of carrying on that connection, because I feel like, back in 69 in the Apollo missions, everyone watched through that TV, that black and white feed, which is iconic. But we're in a
Mhm.
very different time now, with social media and with all these other resources to be able to bring people along. So I'm curious how that we are going continues to be embodied through these next few missions.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so powerful. NASA really knows how to come up with their slogans, right?
Yes, absolutely.
As a writer, I'd love to ask you again, getting back into your craft. You're so
Hmm.
good. And also as a social media manager and curator, is there ever someone in particular that you personify that you write to or towards or for? Like, is there an 8-year-old girl in Kansas that you want to be able to translate these technicals so that she's totally on board and understands? Or do you ever picture a group of people, or kind of like, how do you approach when you've got like, all right, I know how this goes because I know the challenge, but I can't wait to see how you approach it. You've got like, okay, this technical thing or widget has
Hmm.
such complex. It works on so many different platforms and it produces such an involved solution. And so I've got to get that into my 20 some words for Twitter and a couple of photos that will represent it appropriately or accurately. And then if I'm lucky, I might have some extra space for a little more words in an article or a story. But
Hmm.
really, even in that challenge, even if you're writing an article, that you have the pleasure and the freedom of some print words and some
Yeah.
space, now you've got to tie it together to what does it mean for me, Jane and Joe on planet
Right.
Earth? How do you approach that?
Yeah, and a lot of the things I write are for a variety of audiences. So I have like a few different types of things I write for. For example, even in the Benefits for Humanity book that we wrote, each section almost has a little bit of a different audience. The thing that's about the scientific breakthroughs is probably a little bit more targeted at the research audience, so that they're up to date on the breakthroughs that have happened and how they might be able to build on that. We're talking about the outreach section, it's probably more targeted at teachers and even students to see how other students have been able to connect with space. So for each thing we create, we're thinking about a little bit of a different audience. So I even write on a weekly basis on a more internal thing, which is a Station Science Top News, which is writing summaries of probably like 2 to 3 research results that have came out in the past week for higher level NASA administrators, which in that case, it's someone who I know is space interested and space aware, but might not be familiar with, likely is not familiar with the details of this specific area of science. So usually I'm trying to break down stuff for an audience that might have a general familiarity with station and science in general, but taking it to the next level to dive into those results. I will say though, when I go to outreach events, oftentimes our goals are just to help people realize that station is up there, because honestly, that's still an outreach mission that we
Yes.
want to help spread. And then 2, that it is an orbiting laboratory,
Mhm.
which honestly, if we can get everyone to like understand and realize that that's what's happening up there, science is the goal of the space station, that's a huge accomplishment, and we want to try to be able to hook as many different audiences as we can into that message, especially covering a wide variety of things, because since there's so many different types of science that happen up there, there's a lot of potential to overlap with everywhere from, there was a Nickelodeon slime in space experiment that was, sent slime up there. And that's a very different group that is trying to engage, a new cancer research, which is
Sure. Yeah.
incredibly important, reaching a very different audience. So trying to leverage the different topics that are covered to be able to target these different people, and then tell the stories that I think would matter to those different audiences. And as much as we can, use the scientists as characters too. When we can have
Yes.
the chance to be able to explain their passion and get that across in the writing, I feel like they're the best characters and the people that can sell this. The astronauts are great too, but the scientists are the ones who have dedicated years to be able to developing this thing and getting this up in space.
Yeah. And it's becoming more and more important. And I don't want to say required because I think that's unfair to ask a scientist or an astronaut that has to be so well trained and well versed and well studied to also be incredibly talented communicators as well. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of our role. We get to step into it and assist them. But it seems like the ones that are well received, or sometimes even, may I dare say, well funded, are the ones that can communicate really well. And I think that's unfair. I think it's a little, you're asking this one person to represent all the goals of the mission, do all the
Mm-hmm.
tasks, know all the safety procedures, the ECLIS. I mean, I'm going to throw in all the acronyms. And oh, by the way, be able to talk to any audience at any given time back on Earth about what you're doing successfully and with a lot of, moxie, and make sure you're smiling. And I think that's not really fair. But I do say, but let's also be honest and say that there are some folks that you just look at them and you're like, okay, Chris Hadfield, he can do it. You can pretty much throw it. I mean, there's some new class of astronauts like Matthew Dominic. There's Don Pettit was all, I
Sure.
mean, some of these folks are, and Kate Rubins, let's be honest, does it not so much through her words, but through her science. And if we can bridge that and interpret that to be like, here's what she's doing, we'll give you the words to explain it because she lights up when she's working in that field. So it's a lot to ask, but that's why they have incredible talent like you, Erin, working at NASA to bridge that for all of us who get to enjoy your work. If
Yeah, and they have to spend their time on a lot of other things
Yeah,
too. It's like it's not
living,
just even a skill
breathing.
set; it's priorities. So
Yeah.
it's fun to be able to serve in that role to support these people who honestly oftentimes value this too. It's just they have other things they need to fill their time with rather than digging into all of this research. And that's why they have me and teams like that. I think you've had Rachel Berry was on the podcast a little while ago too. I worked very closely with her, and she's now in a role supporting even the astronaut crew communication even more. So
That's
it's
great.
great to be able to have a team like that to be able
Yeah.
to do that. So even you're not alone, you can have those other people to nerd out with too about all the science.
Yeah. So you just bring so much enthusiasm to your work. As I've said before, what frustrates you though? Is it that some of the things we've mentioned already, that people sometimes don't understand the 20 years, or they don't understand the influence or sometimes the benefits or investments that are constantly happening on board station and in the space world? But are there little frustrations within your job? And what I mean by that is, simple things like, I wish NASA news was on page one rather than buried in 24. Or I wish we had a bigger social following. Or I wish the astronauts had more time to engage with so many audiences that really have
Sure.
their shared enthusiasm. What are some of the things you wish you could, if you had the opportunity to overcome?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think one of them comes from a good thing, which is that there is so much happening in space right now. There is launches so often that it's hard to give the attention that each one of these deserves to them.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Like
commercial
DART
resupply.
and,
Yes,
oh my
like
gosh.
this overlaps of there's Crew 5 coming up. We have commercial resupply launches. SpaceX and Blue Origin have their own launches all the time. We have DART, and so there's so much happening that's all incredible that it's hard to give the proper attention to each of them that they deserve and really dive into that, because before, if there was one launch with nothing around it, everyone's going to focus on that, and you can really dive in and to talk about all of that. But obviously when we're going back to the moon, that's going to get the priority, and obviously we're putting people on rockets now. So it's I think one of the struggles is just trying to help people realize that all of these other things are still happening with the science and how much they matter. um, and it's just all that great competition that we're also supporting all of these other things. So it also means a lot of extra work for us too, because we're trying to
Lots of
share our
work.
message
Yeah.
in association with those launches as well. They're opportunities, because with Artemis, that's also an opportunity for us to share how station has contributed to that. So there's a higher frequency of things that we're having to put out. Probably a little bit less room to just have that creative time to think about new ways to be able to share stuff. But
Mhm.
again, it comes from a good problem.
Content
It's just a new
rich.
challenge. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You never wake up and go, what should we share today? You're almost like,
Yeah,
oh my gosh, how am I going to get all this
there's
in
so
one
much
day?
happening. Yes, exactly.
I
And
hear
when all of
you.
those pieces are moving in space too, dates are never solid. Stuff is constantly
Yeah.
moving around. It's a constant reshuffling and figuring out the best time to put things out and the best way to reach all of those audiences. So it's a
Yeah.
fun problem. It's just one that's, I think, relatively new to the industry. It's been ramping up, but there's been a drastic ramp up in the past couple of years, which, as someone who's dedicated to this one area, it's fun to see as a spectator for everything else too, outside of this one area of expertise.
Yeah. It is a fun problem. It's wonderful to have this. I can't even
Yeah.
remember a time when we were like, well, I don't know, let's have an editorial board meeting and see what, is new. I never, and that was,
Yeah.
15 years ago. There was never that. I feel like NASA always has something, and it's just always never usually widely known as much as we'd like it to. And there's always like, I don't know, neat, like deep. There's projects that are just coming to the surface. There's projects that are just about to wrap up. I mean, anyway, we can
Yeah.
go on and on. Is there anything, if you weren't doing station, you would like to do? Is there something on your wish list, and not just maybe with NASA, but space in general or writing in general?
Yeah, well, I'll say with NASA first, it is cool to see the kind of evolution to Artemis and the science that's related to that. So I think that's still I got a lot of runway here that's going forward for this whole Artemis program. But I'm excited to hopefully help communicate some of the Artemis science in addition outside of the station. I think we've learned so many lessons for sharing space station science that I'm hoping we get the chance to be able to apply those lessons learned and be able to share that. And for all these, lunar missions and science, it's like a whole, it's
Yeah,
crazy. During my lifetime, we've never been on the moon before. So to think that
right.
can help actually communicate that type of science would be incredible. Outside of NASA, I do a lot of personal social media stuff and really enjoy being able to collaborate with a lot of different groups, especially ones that are reaching, minorities in STEM, women in STEM, things like that. So I love being able to collaborate with a lot of different, whether it's museums or, different channels. CBS Unstoppable is a fantastic group that I've worked with a number of times. So I love in my free time to be able to reach out to those sort of things and continue to kind of develop those partnerships, make the type of content that I might not be able to in my regular job on TikTok and some of these short form media things. That whatever creativity I feel like doing, I can just kind of go with the idea and put it out there. And personally, it's a great way that you were talking about, these storytelling techniques and all the practice trying to tell these scientific ideas in a short period of time. Where if I can spend 30 minutes writing a TikTok video and then film it and publish it, it's different than having to spend a few weeks on an article and getting it reviewed and
Sure.
getting it published. Those are some of my favorite things to be able to continue to develop that skill set.
That's great. And where can people find you and find that work?
Well, first I'll say on Twitter, you can go to ISS_research. That's our main Twitter account for everything related to space station science. And there's lots of other links off of there to all other things station. We also contribute a lot to the ISS Instagram. If you see some science related reels, that was likely our team.
Yay.
Yeah, and then personally, you can find me on all of the social medias at Erin Winnick, ErinWinick.
Perfect. Well, I know you're going to have a whole new bunch of followers after this, after today. I can't wait. I'm always following your work and enjoying it. I'm so glad we got to collaborate. And I hope one day we can do it in person.
Yes.
Whenever I'm down at JSC, I'll let you know. And you do the same when you're out here in the Chicago burbs. So we can do this again in person and have some fun.
Sounds great. Yeah. Thank you for having me and super great to meet you.
Absolutely. We'll put the links for the books into the show notes and all the wonderful places Erin mentioned where you can find her and her work. And then, Erin, would you mind coming back on the show whenever we have space station questions or spin-offs or benefits that we want to ask an expert about? Would you come back?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the meantime, you can always ask us if you tweet it at ISS_research, we'll see it. And if you have a question, we love to happy to answer it.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you. That invitation is wonderful. I know they're going to take you up on it. Thank you
Awesome.
so much, Erin. Okay, we'll see you back here on the show soon. In the meantime, go ISS. Okay, thanks. I'm going to push
All right.
stop or pause.
Cool.
I'm going to